In the southern part of Stow, there's a little family business that maybe some of you know about. It's very widely known throughout a lot of eastern Massachusetts, and that is Honeypot Orchards. And we're very fortunate tonight to have members of the Martin family, who are the owners of Honeypot, as I think you all know, here to speak with us tonight and tell us about some of the history of the orchard and what goes on in the orchard and other things that you might find interesting. So I'd like to have you welcome Richard Martin to start in with a history portion of it. Richard?
Thank you, Don. Very nice for you to do all that. But we had all started back actually in 1640 when our ancestors came over to Salem. We started in Salem. We went to down in Connecticut. They migrated down there, and then they migrated from Connecticut up to where is it now? In Vermont. My wife's not helping me a bit here. In any event, parents went up there first to build a house, such as it was, and the three children came up later when it was done, and the oldest one was a teenager, and the other two were lesser aged. And they walked all the way from Connecticut with a couple of cows all the way up to Vermont, and that was near Barry. And how they ever did it, in my mind, is just, you know, nowadays you get in a car and you go. But they walked all the way, they followed the river. And after they stayed there a few generations, they went west to Illinois. And when they went out there, it was sometime after the Civil War, I believe. They had Indians on one side of the lake, and they were on the other side. But they were very friendly. And they learned a lot of tricks and things to do from the Indians. And one very handy thing is to keep in mind, even now today, if you get a severe cut and bleeds profusely, if you've got some cobwebs handy somewhere, you stuff those cobwebs in there. You should mix some charcoal in there. That purifies things a little bit, I guess. And so that cauterizes your wound. So keep that in your head for desperate circumstances. Well, anyway, my father grew up in Kewanee, Illinois, and his grandfather was in the labor of the growing cattle. And he always said, if you take something out of the land, you got to put something back. And with that thought in mind, he's carried that all his life, I believe, because that's what he has done all through the years. And my father became an engineer, mechanical engineer. And he came east when he was young to New York City, no less. And he went to Pratt Institute, I believe, in New York. And from that, he came up to Massachusetts, and he met my mother, and they got married. And as a result, I myself and my two older brothers, but before he came to Stow, he moved back and forth from Boston area out to eastern part of New York for his work as being an engineer. Then he wanted to get back to some sort of farming. And he bought this farm out here in Stow. I think he paid $10,000 for it. It wasn't quite as this farm it is today, because it has grown actually considerably. There's only 77 acres originally in the farm. And as time's gone on, we kept adding on pieces here and there as it came on the market. And it resulted in now we have a total of about 200 acres. And we have some pictures here somewhere. I don't know what time you want to start doing them, Don, but in any event, being an engineer was a savior in many ways, because the first tractor we had was made of a white truck rear end and a Buick engine. It worked. And I remember the first time I tried to drive it when I was in my early teens, timing the clutch and the pedal on the gasoline is a little bit of a knack. I almost took the thing apart. because my timing wasn't very good. But anyway, it survived, and then we went on to buy, I should say build, a sprayer back in the, oh, by the way, we moved to Stow in 1926, and I was 3 years old at the time. Oh, we have something up here now, and where are we? Oh, no, that's the ownership of the farm that we have now in the early years. It starts with different people that, can you take this off and just hold it? Oh, that's much better. We learn things as we go along. And we never could find out exactly when this house we lived in was built. Nobody, even the registry of deeds and so forth, can give us that answer. But I would say it was probably close to 200 years old. And it was part of the Underground Railway. And days gone by, they brought in, before the Civil War, they brought in the colored people, and they had a tunnel from the back. I don't know if it was built for that or not. That came into the cellar. It was probably about 30 feet long, stone tunnel. And I know it was there because we expanded things and we found the stones. And he got to the cellar of the building itself. They had a big stone you could turn. I never saw that, but Mrs. Eastman, who grew up in the area, she told us about that. This big stone down the cellar, you could twist it and you could go pass through into the cellar. Now that must have been fun coming there at nighttime, as they must have done years ago. And upstairs into the attic, under the attic stairs, there was a place you could take off some boards, and you could slip down in this area, only about 5 or 6 feet square. But it was a wonderful hiding place for anybody who would never suspect it was there, I presume. So that's the way the house went. Now, this first picture here we have is from the top of Honeypot Hill looking northeast. And I don't know who those two people are in that picture, but these are pictures, by the way, we got from the Eastmans. And we were fortunate to get them because things like that, they were taking, all these pictures I'm showing you, these early ones, were taken about the last part of 1800s, 1890 or somewhere in that area. They had a friend who was a photographer, and apparently he stayed there and he took a lot of pictures around the area. And we were lucky. And you can snap onto the... Now, I always wondered how these women took care of those clothes with the washing machines they didn't have. And they must have swept up all of them. Now, I don't know who those people are, but as you can see, there's a road and the house in the background and a dirt road and all the rest of it. But those 3 or 4 women in there were around when the picture was taken.
On the left is Dr. Josephine Beatty.
There you go. He was Dr. Josephine Beatty. He knows the answer. That's good. And the other women are people I don't know. Now, that's another one. The trees, that little tree there is alive today, I believe, and it's quite a big maple tree. And I believe down towards the house are some spruce trees that are well over 100 years old, and things look so different from what they are now. All the elm trees, of course, they're all gone. We had beautiful elm trees, you just can't imagine. All right, switch it. Now, I'm sorry? Oh, yes, those streets, that is, no, Whitman Street is the 4 corners out there. There's Sudbury Road that comes from Gleasondale down around by our house and heads towards Lake Boone. Whitman Street comes, if you went straight on Sudbury Road, that takes you Whitman Street out to 62. And Boone Road goes towards the...
So what are the 2 roads there, the 2 main?
Well, right there, you're looking at the Sudbury Road and the driveway. It looked like they got equal usage, doesn't it? Okay, well, we'll go to the next. And that is the time that there's a sale sign up there on that tree. And when we came here, there's looks like a cedar tree in the background of those 2 women next to the house. There was just a stump left there. And I was a youngster, about 6 or 8, 10 years. I loved to drive nails in there, as youngsters would do, And then here's another one to the southwest of the house. You can see the house there. Now, the little triangle looks like a little triangle hut between the house and the barn. That's an ice house. It was dug down the ground about 10 feet, all laid up with stones, and they used to cut ice down on the pond near the down the lane there. And we used it for a few years, but you get to August somewhere, it didn't keep any longer than that, even though you piled sawdust on it. And just below that, towards the house, there was a slaughterhouse. Yes, it seems right in your backyard. And then there's a shed that comes out from that you can't see too well, and an extension of the barn over the right. But it hasn't changed too much. It's the same barn, and I do think that barn burnt down once because when we put a new floor in there, we found remains of ashes that certainly indicated something of a nature of a fire took place. But that's a good barn, believe me, all pegged and so forth. You can't push a building like that down. It's pegged with oak and on the, I guess they're probably pine logs, and it's remarkable workmanship. Now that is the Assabet River, and that's a rail track right from the foreground, and beyond that old field over there is our home up there. There's another house before that. We can't see our place very well from there, and that's Sudbury Road over there on the right. But you'll notice how clean it was from the river up to those homes. I understand that all the way from there down to Gleasondale was pretty much cleared as that is. And can you imagine, what do you walk down through there now, you say you're in no man's land. But it's all grown up in a lot of cases, but that's the way it's changed. Now, by the way, that train track was put in about just before the Civil War. And there used to be 7 passenger trains each way every day. And my father, for a while, when he was working in Boston to support the farm, when he first came out here, he used to walk down to the train station, Lake Boone Station, and it was a 5-minute walk, right in the North Station. Well, that's a cow. We had a couple cows for a while, and that's me on the cow, and things have changed. And well, it's a lot cheaper this way. And that's my one of my younger brothers. Older brothers, hold on, let's get this straightened out. So we had 2 cows. My father used to milk those in the morning and at night and go to work into Boston and take care of the farm all the same time. All right, now that is how we used to spray. Far cry. That's myself over here on the left. And one of my brothers, I think that's Keith, up in the top of the spray rig, and my older brother, Dana, there, my father with a spray gun. You used to have to drag that hose around the tree. First of all, you went under the middle of the tree, sprayed all over your head. Then you walked around the tree and sprayed all around the perimeter. Now, after you do a few hundred trees of that, you've had it. And then on top of that, it wasn't so bad in the early spring, but you get grass up there a foot or so high, and you've got to pull a 50-foot hose around. It's quite another story. Talk about work. He did. Well, all right, now we got here at the modern ages. When we first moved there, we brought all the apples in on a wheelbarrow. We didn't have many apples, I'll grant you that. And then we graduated to a Model T, which my uncle gave to us. He drove out to the farm, and my father chopped it off and fixed it up. And when we got it out here, by the way, my older brother, he took the engine completely apart. And you could see all the engine was laying all over the floor. And you look at it, you'd say, you're not going to get it back together. But he did. He did a good job, because that thing we ran for years. That's how we brought the boxes in out of the orchards you see there. And it was great fun in the sense that it was a workhorse and a plaything. It was just one of those things that children or kids would love to use. Now that is the back of the house, and there are the apples that boxes. You can't determine it too easily, but they are. My father built a cold storage downstairs. It only held about 1,000 boxes perhaps, but we had to bring them all over there. We didn't even have a conveyors to roll them in on. We carried them all the way into the cellar. And I helped him insulate that thing when I was a youngster. I was in high school at that time, and it was quite a chore. But we did. We got the insulation all installed, and then we could go to work and store our apples. Otherwise, you can't still keep apples around very long without cold storage. And so that worked well for a number of years until we put a larger storage that we presently use. It holds about 15,000 bushel. I think that's right. We're all in the bins nowadays. The boxes are gone. They weigh about 35 or 40 pounds, and the bins weigh 600 pounds. So you don't do it by muscles. It's all forklifts and that nature. Now here we are mowing in the orchard. Now my father's on the back, and I'm on the front, and I'm in that homemade tractor, and the little machine behind him is a sickle bar mower, 5-foot bar. Now we got 10-foot bars, and it's easy, all hydraulic, and everything is very convenient. But that's how we used to do it all. Now that is perhaps me up in that tree. Those were trees of an orchard next to us that we bought sometime in the early 40s in that area. And the orchard was all that size trees. Now, multiple problems. It's way up in the air, and you have to have long ladders. And if you got the spray up there, you're lucky, because a little wind killed that. And we just eliminated it. Took the whole orchard down. By the way, no chainsaws. It was all crosscut saws and axes. They worked though. And then we modified our sprayer, and we put that tripod on top of the spray rig, and I could ride up there. And you know something? Oh, that was wonderful. You didn't have to pull a hose around and do all those silly things that you had to do maybe years gone by. And then that, of course, was pulled by a tractor at this point. See, early on, that was pulled by horses, and you sat up there where I'm standing. So that was a great progression. Now, there came another phase of handling the insects and funguses. That's a homemade duster. That's an old Chevrolet car and chassis. And with this, that's a dusting machine, a little triangular thing in the middle of the thing. That's where somebody sat with a hose, and you put powder or dust in that tank. And you had to have quiet weather, because the dust goes with the air. You just no way about it. But it was certain circumstances. If you had wet conditions, you couldn't get through with the heavy equipment, heavy as of then. So we used that quite a bit, and it did fit in very well. We don't use dusters anymore, and not because we don't want to. The dust is outrageously expensive, and next door neighbors don't like it, and I don't blame them. Now here is, and you can't see it too well, but that's the first commercial mower we had, sprayer that we had. And we come down to the pond, and you put your hose in the pond there, and you suck the water into the tank, and you put your spray material in there, and with the tractor. It takes 2 people. That was back then. Nowadays, it takes 1 person. Now what do we got here? Oh yeah. During the war, we grew a few pigs. Pigs are very interesting animals, as you all know. We had our own meat. My father knew how to butcher animals, which was very nice. He came from the Midwest. And what you did, that's a 50-gallon drum. You built a fire underneath there. And after you'd killed the pig, you dropped him in one way and dropped him in the other way. That way you scrape all the bristles off. And then you got a nice clean hide of the pig for meat after you get through with that. I'll tell you something very interesting. We had 2 pigs. The first pig was quite easy to catch, but the second one heard loud protests when he got his throat slit. So Dickens was job to catch the second one, but he did meet his maker. So, all right, now that is up on Priest Hill. That's now there's a development, all houses up there and so forth. That was an orchard up there, not at that time particularly, and that was an observation post for after in the early 50s after the war, as sort of being for observation of planes. They were concerned about at that time being attacked. Well, I'm not sure where, but so that was an outpost we used, and I know all the people there. I was amongst them, and but that didn't. Of course, that phased out. But things happen. All right, now that's a picture of the some of the orchard taken full bloom. All those apple trees and the bees were busy and so forth. But that's looking up towards Sudbury Road, and it was always beautiful. There's crab apples on the right there. The most fragrant flower you can find anywhere. In the nighttime or fall, I should say, in this evening, you walk down there and it was quiet. It was just like a perfume factory. You just couldn't imagine, in damp conditions, of course. But anyway, that's changed now too. I mean, there's still the trees there, but not that same type. Now, they used to have what you call twilight meetings for fruit growers and run by the Extension Service. And we went to different orchards all over the county, Middlesex County. And that was one of the tours they had at our place in the spring. And we'd get taken around on a tractor. I'm driving there. And the other growers would come along. And the Extension Service was really great in that time. We had to follow. It was so devoted to the business of apples that he'd come around. You'd call him up anytime. He'd say, I got a problem. He'd be there in a few hours later. And he'd try to get you out of your problem. But so every week, I think we had every 10 days, I've forgotten which, he'd have a meeting. And that's what happened. You go around saw different orchards. A good education. All right, now that was our first chore, our first advance into having a sales room. That's my father in there. That was a little one-car garage in the barn, which is expanded beyond that now. And so that's how we started out, with not much of anything, but eventually people kept drifting in, and we kept drifting out and grew. And so that's myself and my father there. And he got collecting all these old tools you see up. Some of them came from Vermont, where we came from. His ancestors came from, and the other things he collected around here and so forth. He had a junk dealer friend, and he said, Cliff, I got something you want for the farm." And sure enough, he would. And now we called him Mr. Blueberry. He came very frequently, and he got those 2 pails, 3/4 full of blueberries. He picked that many. I don't know what he did them all with, honestly, but he loved to pick blueberries. Well, we had the blueberry bushes, and that's just fine. So we just called him Mr. Blueberry. Now, it's kind of hard to discern that, but right in the middle of that those trees in the background, there's a sprinkler. In the spring, it gets cold sometimes. It actually gets down below freezing substantially. It's a dangerous time for our apple blossoms because you kill the blossoms, you don't have any fruit. By putting water on the trees, you can just about handle 25 to 23 degrees without damage. But you can't stop the water because the water absorbs the cold. And by that way, you can do a wonderful thing. You might get icicles about 6 or 8 inches on the trees, but as long as you keep adding that water, a degree from freezing to thawing is a lot of calories. I've forgotten exactly how many. So that's what does it. You got to have water. We had water, and we did it, and we worked. It's done well. I don't think the two go together too well because they might. We do another thing to do is have helicopters cruise across the orchard, and they will drive down the warm air and disperse the cold air. But that's kind of expensive, and we did it a few years. Not too good. Now, you have land which is saturated, and it doesn't drain out, hard pan, it gets down in the soil. And the only way to cure that is to put drains in. We've probably got literally miles of drainage. We used to use a tile that was in the days gone by. Now we use this drainage tile, which is run out in 50 or 100-foot coils, and you make sure you put plenty of gravel over, and it works out. It does get the water out of the ground, so you can get through. Now this is we've developed wagons which carry people, obviously, and that's just one picture of some loads of people on being. I don't know where they are there right now, but people love to get a hay wagon ride, and it's quite picturesque. Yeah. Okay. Now here is pick your own lines. We'll have. I never could figure out how many people come. You can't count them. At least I can't. And you have these long lines for people to come. They buy a bag and they go about the business. They're directed to where to go and so forth. And it's turned out to be quite a business. I mean, people wanting to pick their own apples. But you can't quite get it through some people's heads. They're not rocks. They're soft. They'll bruise. And when they get home, I think some people are horribly surprised. But we warned them. And so this has been a big part of our business. And it's a lot of fun, but it has its challenges, believe me. Now, this is a new orchard. It was planted probably 15 years ago or more. We've gone to all practically dwarf trees. The trees that don't go any more than 8 feet high, 10 feet at the tops. And they're just naturally small trees because you still have to prune them. Every year, every one of these trees has to be pruned. And surprised how much brush that grows in a tree like that. And even in this part here, I'm sure there's some irrigation, I'm not sure to say irrigation, but drainage lines there also. So this is what happens now, but we don't get those great big old trees anymore. They're impractical and expensive. It doesn't work. You get more apples per acre this way than the other way. Okay.
That's the last of the slide.
Oh, that's the last of the slide. Okay. Now, wow, this is handy to have this thing like this. Well, over the years, it's been a change that is phenomenal, and as I look back on it, because the work and labor involved in it was so much physical. Now it's a case of manipulation of the equipment, and it's more skill. It used to be brute force. You'd hand mow the side half a day, 4 hours or so, and you knew you'd done some work. And now you run it with machines, and you're still doing some work, but you can stand it much more easily. But it's a good life. I don't regret anything that ever went on. It's just one of those things that it was good, but it's expensive. As I say, the first 50 years, my father put everything he earned into the farm before he really made anything. Originally, I delivered apples to stores. I ended up with Stop and Shop and so forth. We used to go to the Boston Market, Faneuil Hall. And when I went in there, it was quite an interesting thing. Going into Boston, number one, is negative. And then you never knew what you're going to get for your apples. It was hot, just luck, as I saw it. So I started delivering directly to the stores, and I ended up with Stop and Shop, with the stores and a few others. And then after a while, I said, I was gone 4 mornings every week, and then I had to come back and grade apples with the high school kids back then, and get ready apples to take out the next day. Out of there at 7 o'clock in the morning, and get back at 2 and grade apples till whatever. But we went through a lot of changes in help. Before the war, we had enough people unemployed that wanted to pick apples locally. And that was part of their income, and they worked hard and they were good. And then the war came along, and that, of course, all the help people was just absorbed in the war effort. We even had German prisoners one year. They were okay, but we had one fellow who was Polish at that time, and you know what happened to Poland? And it was like oil and water; they didn't mix. And then after the war, we had a a number of GIs who came back, didn't have anything to do, so they picked apples. And of course that naturally dried up after a while. And then we had Canadians came down, and they were a good bunch. But when the government up in Canada took the idea of socializing or supplying unemployment, that dried up. And it was easier doing nothing. Then we turned to Jamaicans, and they have been very effective and very good. They work hard. Oh, by the way, if you go to Puerto Ricans, they made us take it for a while. Puerto Ricans, from what our experience was, they get 2 feet off the ground and they shake. But the Jamaicans, they'll do just about anything. They're very cooperative and they're polite. And but you know, one of our dollars goes to become 50 some odd dollars down in Jamaica. So when they go back home with them, they make $300 or $400 or more a week by work. They work long hours. Don't misunderstand me, but they go back. They don't have to do another thing till they come back another year. So and some have been here coming for more than 25 years, and we've been very good experience with the Jamaicans. Well, I guess Julie was going to say a few words here. She is the backbone of the sales room, and she knows what's going on upside, backside, and she takes care of those girls and follows her so well. I'm amazed how she can remember all their names, because we have as many as 70 or 80 people, employees, all part-time. But in any event, she handles it beautifully. And Julie, I'll let you fill in all the things I forgot.
I'm going to take over when I came in. Thank you, Dad. Well, I was fortunate enough to come back into the business about 17 years ago. When I went off to college, I don't know, about 26 years ago, I never thought I would have anything to do with the family business. And then after a few years out in the real world, I came back during a fall season to help out in the store and have been there ever since. Got hooked into it, and I love it. Very fortunate to be a part of the business. When I first started, I worked in the store helping Dad and Mom with all the work there. And then my brother and I, Andrew, who many of you know, he's sick tonight, so wasn't able to be here. He was going to talk a lot about the outdoor work that's done. I'll try to touch on that briefly if you're interested. So I helped out in that area with the store, and then I started helping with the pruning, which is what we do all winter. We spend about 3.5 months during the winter pruning every apple tree. And then we get into the spraying and the fertilizing and planting, mowing, and that takes about another 4 months. And then we thin apples during the summer. Is everything okay? Okay. Is the voice okay? All right. And then we get into our selling season, which starts mid-July and goes until Christmas time. So we're open for about 5 months of sales, but we do about 75% of our sales in 5 weeks. And as many of you know, that's from mid-September till mid-October. And that's when we staff up now to about 70 people working for us. And that's where Dad was referring to all the names to remember. But we have a wonderful pool of people that work with us, for us. We have a great group of about 40 teens that live in the area, mostly Stow. And also the Jamaican workers and retired and moms who want to come work during the day hours. So we really have a great mix of people working for us. A couple things I just wanted to touch on is when I came back into the business about 17 years ago, a great new word was coming about called Agri Tourism, which is what really appealed to me. And that's where we've transferred everything more into the experience of the farm, not just the apples themselves. We find about half of our customers are coming for the experience of the apple picking, getting lost in the maze, visiting with the animals, doing the hay rides, getting their pumpkin, their cider donuts, the whole fun thing. They're coming and spending about 3 or 4 hours at our orchard. So that word, agritourism, has really been great for us. It's been a lifesaver in the sense that that's what I love to do. It's the people coming to us, having a wonderful experience at the orchard. Along with so I say about half of our business is that end of it, and then the other half is our local steady customers that come and visit us from late July right up until Christmas. So we really can't have one without the other. We're very fortunate to have both ends of it. We also have developed over this past years a lot with school groups. That's a huge end of our business now, and that's really a great fun. We do a lot of kids coming out from Boston, and they come for a couple hours during the morning, and they'll do the hayride and the apple picking and the animals, etc., everything I had just mentioned. We also do a lot with birthday parties and company outings. Company picnics have become a bigger event as well. A couple other things, we're very fortunate with the location, being just about 22 miles outside of Boston. We're really a nice afternoon drive to get out and visit the farm, so we're lucky that way. And it's just a great fun experience to come to the farm. Some of the challenges that Dad touched on a little bit, when people ask what our biggest challenge is, it really is the weather. Starting with the spring, the frost we have to worry about losing the crop. Then we have to hope that during pollination time, we have nice days so the bees will work and do their job. If it's not 65 degrees or warmer with not much wind, then we're not going to have the bees do their pollination. So that's very important. And then we have to worry about in the summertime having a hurricane, or not, hopefully. And then, of course, in the fall, we don't want rain, and we want to hope those 4 busy weekends, the last 2 in September and the first 2 in October, are great weather. Luckily, this year we had 3 out of 4, which was great. So we were fortunate that way. I feel lucky to be in a great business. I think selling apples is one of the best things you can do. What better than to eat apples all day, which is part of what I get to do. Introducing people to apples. Of course, I get to eat them and tell them all about them. Today we have about 27 different varieties of apples that we grow and sell, and it's really fun because so many of them are crosses between other apples, and you can really turn customers into loyal. They just get really loyal when you get them involved in an apple, when you talk about the crosses and how they mix, and it's really pretty exciting, believe it or not. It's almost as exciting as wine tasting. That's really, was there anything else you wanted me to touch on with the business? No, I had no slides, I'm sorry, and I should look at what you had outlined because Andrew unfortunately wasn't able to make it. Did I cover it? Okay. All right. Did anyone have any questions that my dad or I could answer for you?
Yeah, I wonder if you've ever had to import bees for your pollination.
Oh, yes, we do. If we import bees during pollination time, and yes, probably hundreds of thousands of bees. Is that 100? At least, yeah, 100 hives. Okay. Actually, a little joke on the video, if anybody caught it, was May is our highest employment month at the farm with the bees. But yes, without the bees, we wouldn't have it. So that's so key. We always make sure we bring in plenty.
So you bring them in every year?
Every year, yes. There was a few years back when within about a 2-week time period of pollination, we only had one nice afternoon. It basically was rainy or cold or windy every day. So within a 4-hour time span, all the trees' blossoms got pollinated. So that's why it's key to have enough of the bees.
Do you have a hard time getting them now?
Do we have trouble getting the bees?
Right now, no. We bring them up to the south. Now, they unless you can use the chemicals to keep them alive, there would be virtually no bees around. And it's a shame. All the wild bees are gone. There used to be wild bees in abundance, and you could get by without bringing any in. But unless they're properly handled with the proper times and so forth, that's the only way they do it. But they truck them up here by the truckloads. until hopefully they don't have an accident.
Well, yeah, that's a little interesting, actually. I didn't touch on that. Is how they come up the coast, the beekeepers. So they start down south, and then they spend about 2 weeks with us, and then they'll go up to Maine. So it's quite an operation with the bees in itself. Okay, the questions on cider pressing. Yes, we do it all at the orchard. And how many years have we been doing it at the orchard?
30 years maybe?
About 30 years. We always use a mix of apples. They need to be very ripe, the sweetest ones you have.
Well, here's the story. You can take beautiful, good apples off the tree and make cider out of them. As apples ripen, the starches turn to sugars. And the riper the apple is, as long as it's not rotten, the sweeter the cider is. And by the way, all our apples, they get thoroughly washed and scrubbed by brushes before they get chewed up into the pulp, which goes into the making the cider. And she's right. If you can mix more varieties together, the better the flavor as a rule. If there's any other questions we can help you with, that's it. I'm sure.
Richard and Julie, thank you very, very much for that. That was a delightful presentation. And we also thank you for donating the cider and apples for this event tonight. And donuts, yes. And